What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing another video today. We're going to go ahead and preview the professional pro side group stage for Major 1. We can't really speak towards the challengers teams because we won't know which of the 4 challengers teams of the 8 will make it until Wednesday night. So I'm just going to kind of talk about each group, talk about maybe a potential upset from the challengers team, but more so speak on the CDL Pro teams, their strengths or weaknesses, and of the 3 teams, 2 CDL teams are going to get out of each group. So let's dive in. All right, basically to start on Wednesday, we're going to have 8 challengers teams play in 2 groups of 4, basically what we call GSL groups, to decide the 4 teams that advance to the pro group play. And it very much is going to kind of mirror what you're going to see on the pro side, right? You got to win 2 before you lose 2. It's unclear as of the time I'm recording this video how these challenger teams they get out will be seeded, but basically like you look at Decimate Gaming here, if they win 2 series, they qualify. If you lose 2 series, right, you go to the elimination bracket, you lose twice, you're out. So win 2 before you lose 2. And then they'll get added into the pro kind of group stage, which will happen from Thursday to Friday. And it's basically the same thing. Win 2 before you lose 2. If you go 2-0, you'll get the top seed in your group going in the bracket. If you go 2-1, you will get the bottom seed in the bracket. And it's not like you go into losers at a bracket. Every one of the sort of 8 teams that get out of this 16-team group stage will all go into a winners round 1 in a double elimination bracket. So we're not having that same format of last year where there's some teams starting losers round 1. Like everybody's gonna have a chance to be in the winners bracket, regardless of if you got first seed or second seed in your group. Obviously, if you're one of the bottom 4 teams in your group and you lose 2 before you win 2 and you're out, like you're not playing the weekend. It's unclear, I think, for challengers teams if they get put back in open bracket, but at least for the pro teams, if you kind of fail that portion, like you're not playing the weekend. Now that we've gotten out of the way, let's talk about each group. Let's talk mostly about the CDL teams because, again, I can't really speak towards what challengers teams are going to be 1 through 4 seed. So it's kind of hard for me to sort of say, like, you know, this team's going to slot in this spot. So just keep that in mind as you watch this video. All right, first up, we have Group A. And so the CDL teams right now in this group are the Minnesota RØKKR, Los Angeles Guerrillas, and the New York Subliners. So I'm going to start with Minnesota. They had a pretty good start to the CDL. I mean, obviously, as you guys know, this year, their first match was kind of controversial versus OpTic. I think you could maybe argue they might have lost that series. They would have been down 1-2 and they went to a hard point and maybe OpTic wins it. I guess we'll really never know because OpTic forfeited the series. The RØKKR ended up going 3-1 with their only loss being against, surprisingly, Vegas. For RØKKR, I think their strengths surprisingly have been control in Major 1. They're actually 4-0 in that stage. And obviously, there's a good search team on paper. Their only loss was on an LSCLO search, which I don't necessarily think plays to their strengths. Like, they're not a super kind of sound horde type team, sort of in their play style. They're going to be really good at sort of teamwork, set piece type. So I would like to see them a lot more, maybe on Hotel's a good map for them. Embassy, they haven't played a lot of, or any real Fortress or Mercado yet. So just keep that in mind. The one weakness for Minnesota, I think, is hardpoint. Like, they actually have not won a game 1 so far in the CDL this season. They're actually 0-4 on that mark, which, by the way, you know, they're 3-1 in game 2, so they're doing a good job of getting it to 1-1, and then they're winning those game 3s. So they're kind of in a lot of spots now to sort of close out the series, you know, in the 4th map. And obviously, you might look at these numbers again and be like, this doesn't really add up. Like, what about when they have played 4 game 4s? Again, keep in mind, the forfeit via OpTic is not really accounted for here. They also haven't gone to game 5 yet, which is interesting. So like when I look at RØKKR, right, this is about kind of an interesting kind of issue with them, I think, is I thought that the biggest point of getting this team would be improving their hard point. And so far, through 2 weeks, it's early. They haven't done that yet. So that's their biggest thing they need to work on. But if they can kind of get back to a 500 in hard point and do a good job kind of getting their map pool they want situationally, I really like the search that they have in their backpack to really help them sort of get deep in this tournament. So I think if we go kind of back to looking at Group A, I think they're probably the favorites to get out. I would put them as one of the teams. And that kind of leaves us then sort of the LAG New York Subliners Challenger seed conversation, 4th seed Challengers team. So I don't really know who that's going to be. So let's table that for a second because I don't think they're going to beat RØKKR. Now, it's possible the Challengers team, you know, maybe plays an LAG or New York, and then we get kind of an interesting sort of last match in the group, but kind of hard to predict that now. Let's talk about LAG and New York. I thought LAG might go 1-3 in this stage, maybe 0-4, but surprisingly actually did a pretty good job. If we take a look at their series wins, you know, they beat Seattle actually on the first series of the year for them. Obviously, Seattle struggles in S&D, I think really helped LAG win that series. Then they didn't look particularly good against London or New York. But a surprising win yesterday against Boston. And I don't want to discount the LAG win here because I thought they did a really good job, especially on that LSCLO search. But I thought Boston kind of definitely tossed map 3 and map 4 of this series. So I don't know if they replay this series if Guerrillas win like 6 out of 10 times or 7 out of 10 times. But listen, I tip LAG, bro. Like, you went 2-2. I don't think anyone really expected that. A lot of people thought they'd be like the 10th, 11th, maybe 12th best team in the CDL so far. The map win percentages are pretty even. I mean, you know, the strengths and weaknesses are almost the same when you take a look at this team. Like, they have a lot of really good dynamic playmakers that when they're on, they're going to be really difficult to kill. They've got good movement. I'm talking mostly about Hook and Neptune, and we know when Alec goes off what he can do with the main AR. But it's also their weakness because sometimes they pull up to a series and they're just completely invisible. The teamwork's not there. They get frustrated. This team's going to be like super up and down. And it's just hard to know on a given day what version of LAG we're going to get. And so when we take a look at sort of New York, kind of a almost similar situation. They played really poor week one and lost to London and Toronto, but they beat LAG as we just saw, and they beat Boston as well this weekend. So they're another team that I just like, it's hard for me to read again, kind of with the 2-week split. Map count doesn't really give you much of kind of a feeling of any kind of strengths and weaknesses. I would say kind of watching them play, if we're going to talk about sort of purely sort of the eye test, I think Preston's played a lot better, especially this back end weekend, which is helpful. And I think Hydra has been sort of a top player. If they can kind of carry on sort of the communication that we heard, I believe it was in the Boston series this weekend, where Hydra is kind of leading the comms. Like, I really like the potential ceiling as a dark horse in this tournament for New York. But if we see the New York that we had in the first week, where the team cohesion did not even look close to being on the same page, like, they can get in real trouble in this group. Personally, for me, if I have to pick between LAG and New York, unfortunately, I think I am going to go with the New York Subliners. So I have Minnesota and New York together this group. But the thing with LAG and New York is, like, I don't know if either team is super consistent. And again, we're talking about a LAN event where we just had a meta switch. It's the first event of the season. A lot of crazy things could happen. The teams that adapt the quickest over the course of the 4 days will probably win the event. So I think Minnesota gets through. After that, I think it's a little bit murky in this group, but if I have to pick something, it's going to be New York. All right, we got Group B. So this is Toronto, the third challengers team coming out of that play-in. OpTic Texas and Florida. So I'm going to talk actually about OpTic Texas and Florida first, because I want to give people this history. If you are new to the CDL, you might look at this matchup and be like, oh, this is cakewalk easy for OpTic Texas. But last year, the OpTic Texas team really struggled to beat Florida on land. It was actually kind of a meme at one point around Dave Patty, and just how good Florida would like turn up for this series against OpTic and beat them every time on land. Now you take a look at OpTic's sort of map record, and again, pretty even, but I think the biggest thing for me in terms of apparent strengths for OpTic, I think have actually looked pretty good in search. You know, they did lose a tough round 11 on Fortress against Thieves, and I think they kind of tossed that one also. Illy got a kind of tough hit marker 5-5, but they looked good against Royal Ravens in search, who were actually like one of the better search teams in the first week. They beat that really good Florida S&D squad in S&D. So, you know, I will excuse the Embassy 6-0 against RØKKR first match of the tournament, because to be honest, you know, the first match of the year, like, a lot of stuff will go wrong. So I like where OpTic search is at. I like their control gameplay. They were probably going to win that one against Minnesota RØKKR, so it's a little bit unfair if you look at the score. To me, the weakness for OpTic right now is hardpoint. You know, Rambo did a post-game interview after their last series on Sunday, and I think talked about sort of the difficulties they've had with practice due to players being sick and COVID and having to switch from the Hex quarters to the new OpTic/old Envy headquarters, as well as sort of the meta switch has kind of thrown their hardpoint a whack. I don't know if I necessarily agree 100p with the last portion of what he said there. So I think I'm curious to see which version of OpTic hardpoint we get starting on Thursday. Florida, just like I've said with sort of LAG, I thought they might get smoked in Major 1, taking a look at their schedule, because they had to play like Vegas, OpTic Texas, RØKKR, and Thieves, and surprisingly they went 2-2 in that set. I think for them, biggest strength is always, of course, search for this team. That's really the win condition they need, and they've actually been not too bad on control, but they've played 3 out of 4 on El Estelio, and I wonder if teams may try to play them on, say, a Fortress, where, you know, this team might have real difficulty to play offense on that map. And obviously, if Florida don't play Fortress, then they're going to see a lot of Hotel. And again, I think similar issues. So we'll see if teams counter adjust to that. The weakness for this Florida team really is hardpoint, bro. They're just not a good hardpoint team on paper, skill-wise, sort of team-wise. And it sort of narrows their potential win conditions against better teams. But, you know, it didn't stop them from, you know, say, winning 3 straight, including a hard point against Thieves. So we'll see. I mean, they're really an upset team. I don't have them going super deep in this tournament. And if they were a better hard point team, I'd feel a lot better about this matchup against OpTic. But I think even with sort of history in this matchup, I think OpTic can get it done, because they're both, you know, kind of mid a hard point. And if they're both going to be kind of mid a hard point, I'll lean more towards OpTic in that situation. And just to quickly touch on Toronto Ultra, They went 3-1, had a pretty good split. I think their only real tough spot was sort of the 3-1 loss to RØKKR. They looked good against New York. They went to game 5 against FaZe and looked good there as well, and then took care of business against Seattle. Toronto's coming in on good form right now. They look very dangerous in search, very dangerous in control. I think hardpoint for them is maybe a little rocky. They're not necessarily looking like one of the Hundo P, top hardpoint teams, but we'll see what happens when they get to land. But I like where this team is at in terms of their mastery of all 3 game modes, and are definitely one of the top contenders for this tournament. So I have them getting out, them and OpTic getting out of this group. It's just a question of which one will be first seed, second seed when they probably play Thursday night. All right, next up we have Group C, and this is where we get to sort of a little bit of an interesting situation. So Atlanta FaZe do get top seed in this group thanks to some developments on Sunday. It was looking like their 2-2 record was going to probably put them in a sort of the second and third season group, but based on a couple of results on Sunday, they ended up getting to a 4th seed. And you see here this LAT/London thing. So as I talked about sort of in my last video, there's this big logjam of teams at 2-2, and basically what happened is LA Thieves and London are tied on pretty much every tiebreaker. So at some point this week, last I heard was going to be like on Wednesday, these teams are going to have to play some kind of bonus match to decide who goes into what group. Again, not 100% confirmed, but I had heard that the winner of that will go into Group D, and the loser then goes into this Group C. I think let's start with FaZe, and then we'll kind of, I guess, talk about LA Thieves and London both in this group, and then Seattle. And it's going to make this kind of hard to do predictions, but let's try our best. Kind of an interesting 2 weeks for Atlanta FaZe. Not, I think, A+ results for them, but they did have, on paper, a very tricky schedule. Like, they had to play Boston first match, and Boston finally got that victory against FaZe they've been looking for over a year. FaZe then got a pretty fun one against Thieves in game 5. Then they lost to Toronto in game 5, and then they 3-0 smoked Vegas Legion. If you look at the scoreline, it was not close. It was a 40-minute series. So I think, like, if you're the FaZe team, a lot to like, a lot to work on. For them, I think that kind of works. We take a look at their strengths and weaknesses. They look like one of the better hardpoint teams right now, and I'm not surprised. They've always been in that top 3 for hardpoint conversation every single year. I think the weakness, if we look at this team, though, is search. Their situational search play has not been the best. Their play around bomb down situations, both on offense and defense, have not been the best. If this team can figure out search and destroy, as we always say, I think they're definitely always going to be making it to grand finals at events. It was a big limiter on their success last season, was their struggles at time in search against like the best team in the tournament, second best team in the tournament. And it seems like this year it's still a little bit bumpy, so let's see if they can clean it up. But I expect them to be really good in the respawn. So I don't see FaZe really having trouble against the Challengers team, just because I think they'll outclass them in the respawns. And I see them getting through in this group, regardless of if it's Thieves or London. It's just, again, a question of how do they do in that Thursday night match. They have to go to Friday to try and get second seed. We'll see. Let's talk about the other teams in this group. So Seattle's one of the more interesting squads and has some of the biggest questions going into this event. Surprising 1-3 result from them through 4 matches. Lost in game 5 to LAG. Lost to Boston, so they were 0-2 going into this weekend. Last weekend, they did get a nice victory against a hot London team, but then they won first map against Toronto and couldn't get anything done after that. Strengths and weaknesses with Seattle. One is, again, they're a really good respawn team. They have some auto vetoes. They've only played hotel control somehow through 4 matches. We'll see what happens there if teams counter adjust. And it looks like they haven't really played any Hydro hardpoint. But other than that, this squad with Pred, with Sib, with Mac is going to be a dangerous respawn team. But man, their weakness once again, bro, and it was the same problem really at times last year. They're just not a good search team. I don't quite understand with the players they have on their team why they really struggle in this game mode, but they haven't won one yet so far through this season, the CDL, and is really the biggest limiter on their ceiling right now. They can get to sort of elite S&D mark, which they did during their major win last year. I really like this team's chances. If they really struggle more in search, like, this might be a team that maybe doesn't get out of this group. Again, because we can't really speak towards which of the Thieves or London's going to win their matchup. I'm just going to kind of cover both at this point. Thieves went 2-2. Again, just like FaZe, they didn't have like the easiest of schedules, I think, on paper, because a lot of people thought Vegas would be good, but they took care of that 3-1. They lost the FaZe game 5. We just talked about that. Florida actually beat them surprisingly earlier last weekend, and then they did take care of business against OpTic. So like a lot to like if you're Thieves, a lot to like work on if you're Thieves. To me, kind of strengths are they look pretty solid across all game modes. I would say maybe they could have lost that search against FaZe if they didn't clutch up a bunch of those 1v2s and 1v3s, but I still like where their search game is at. Control looks pretty good as well. Teamwork's good there, and hardpoint's solid as well. I think the biggest limiter though For Thieves, like from a slaying standpoint, they've been a little bit weak in that area. That's always been sort of a weakness for them, even last season. They rely a lot, I think, on their teamwork to kind of, get map control, get real positive results in terms of objectives. So looking to see if they can slay a little bit better when they get to land, but they're going to be really competitive, I think, in this tournament, again, just because of how good their chemistry is. And I think talking about London, really kind of a tale of two different weeks. First week, they looked like maybe the best S&D squad in the game, really having a good result against Subliners and then getting it done against LAG. But this weekend, aka last weekend, they lost in 4 to Seattle, and then OpTic beat them in a game 5, and the game 5 really wasn't that close. So I don't really know what to think about this London team, bro, because like they looked like a really solid S&D squad, and they came back down to earth this last weekend. Hardpoint looks, kind of interesting. They're definitely a team I probably wouldn't want to play on Fortress because they look really good with the 4 AR kind of sets, so I'd want to play them on more subby maps. And they looked pretty solid in control, but again, they've only played Hotel. I think really Asen's been sort of a key player on this team, and his performance has been really, really good so far, extremely tippable. But I think the weakness is I still want to see more what this team can do when they get taken off of a lot of 4 AR situation. And are they a good S&D team? Let's see if they can kind of carry some of that momentum into this week, because I didn't like really what I saw from their search the last 2 matches they played in this major split. So here's my prediction for this group. I think FaZe go through, and actually I think either if Thieves get in this group, I think they'll go through. If London goes in, it's really a coin flip between them and Seattle, but I think I'd probably pick London over Seattle purely on just, I think London may just be a better S&D team, and when we get in these sort of coin flip situations, I tend to lead towards the S&D team. But this could get weird, bro. This group can get weird, and again, I'm not entirely clear yet if it's a winner or loser situation, that bonus match, who goes in that group. So we'll see more Wednesday, whenever this is sorted, on what this final group looks like. So finally, we got Group D. This is going to be Boston playing the best challengers team coming out of the play-in. Obviously, we got the Thieves in London situation, and then we got Vegas. So let's talk about Boston and Vegas and make some predictions. Just like with LAG, it was really a tale of 2 weekends for Boston. Coming into that first weekend, they were flying super, super high. They had a great win against FaZe, a great win against Seattle. People were like, oh, we really gassed up this team in the offseason. They're really delivering. Like they may, like peak a lot earlier than we thought. But then they kind of came back down to earth, losing in 5 against New York, and then a surprise loss yesterday to LAG. And honestly, they tossed the last 2 maps in that series. So I don't really know what to think about Boston right now. I think the hard point's been good. I think the S&D at times has been really good. But again, all of their victories have been on Fortress. So we'll see if people try to dodge them on that map and play something else. Control may be their weakness so far, which is a little bit surprising considering the personnel that they have. But they've had like 2 tough losses on Hotel, and it feels to me a little bit of like a pacing sort of speed issue with some of their players on Control, just kind of tossing away lives. I think that could be easily fixed when they get to land and kind of practice that. But I'm looking to see if they can improve on that 1-3 record in Control through 4 series. But ultimately, I kind of like Boston still sort of advancing in this group and getting deeper in this tournament. Do I think that they're on paper like a top 4 team yet? I don't know, because there's like a 6 or 8 team logjam, and then some of those teams I think are more of an inside track to being top 4. But my thought process on Boston hasn't changed. I feel like their ceiling is higher this year. They can maybe beat some top teams. Let's just see if they do it at this event. And let's talk about Vegas, probably the weakest team so far, honestly, of the 12 we've seen in the CDL this season. It was looking like they would go 0-4, bro, after the first couple of matches. They lost to Thieves, lost to Florida, got absolutely smoked by FaZe earlier this weekend. And so this RØKKR match to me felt like a must win, and they really met the moment in that match. It was super exciting. 2 really close hard points. I think for Vegas, we talk about strengths and weaknesses. Strengths are going to be Donnie and Clay. Like those 2 guys are slaying well. They're pretty consistent for the most part from series to series. It's really going to come down to the X factor. Other players on the team, which is going to be Prolute and TJ. I was usually been kind of referring to them as sort of a sub duo, but obviously we're still sort of in a little bit of a 3AR, 4AR meta at times, but they don't have as much skill as some other sort of more aggressive duos that we see in the league. And I think that's what's contributing to really the 0-4 control record. Like they don't have a lot of really good ready control players. And I think that's going to be a big limiter on their ceiling, because they're not that bad of a hardpoint team and they're not that bad of an S&D team, but the control is really brutal. And we saw this with London last year. As good as you are in a hardpoint S&D, if you go up 2-0 and you throw that control, like map 4 is just really a toss up, and then you've got no momentum if you lose that going into game 5. So for me, looking at this final group, I do think Boston will go through. Obviously, they may get a very difficult challengers team draw, and there could be an upset there, which would really flip this group around, potentially in terms of which team goes through first seed, second seed. And I do think taking a look at the Thieves London situation, I think whichever team wins that is going to probably beat Vegas. So I have Boston and one of those LA Thieves London teams to get out of this group. But I think the Challengers team more so maybe in this group, and again, we'll see which one gets through, could kind of toss things into whack. My sort of thesis on the Challengers team again is they're going to have played a day before. They're going to have a few more land matches under their belt, and that might set them up for a really big upset in the first series. I don't know if that'll carry towards their sort of qualifier round matches. You know, will the pro teams then catch up and really, you know, now that they'll have some experience on their belt, really maybe get rid of that potential upset. But we could see a Challengers team win one of these first couple of matches. Yeah, that's my predictions. I think this event's shaping up to be a fun one. I think legitimately you can make a case for 6 to 7, maybe 8 teams to win this event. And it's really shaping up like an old school COD event where the team that wins is going to be a team that, you know, pulls up on Wednesday, starting with the practice there, and really gets a feel for how the game plays on land and makes those adjustments, whether it's tactics, whether it's the right weapon build. We've seen these with a lot of these first events. Like, you just got to be able to adjust in the moment on the weekend and not just rely on the strats that you were prepping the weekend before, because no one's played this game on land yet. No one's been in that environment. And we always know that things are going to be a little bit different when you get there. So I'm excited to see what happens starting on Wednesday and Thursday. As always, guys, let me know in the comments what you guys think about this video. Like if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more content, and we will see you guys on the next one.